Everything you know is wrong. And they've been lying to you.
So people who follow this channel know that I enjoy pointing out, all the things on these classic jazz recordings that don't fall into the neat explanations of the theory books, and I like poking holes in theory. I mean, it's a thing with me that I'm a bit of a chippy autodidact, so I want to trumpet this loudly on the interwebs to anyone who will listen in the form of extremely niche clickbait. Minor 2-5-1s. Most of the textbooks and most of the charts I've ever seen like to tell you that the 2 chord in a minor 2-5-1 is a 2 minor 7 flat 5. But what if I was to tell you, in a minor 2-5-1, you can use whatever flavour of 2-5 you like? It can be, in fact, a major 2-5. So let's start our journey with something familiar and open the Aebersold Book of Lies. Sorry, I mean the Charlie Parker Omni book, page 18. Here above the melody of Blues for Alice, you can see quite clearly that Aebersold writes out the changes as F major 7th or F major, E minor 7 flat 5, A7. And this is certainly how I was taught like a Parker blues. It's a minor 2-5-1 into D minor in bars 2 to 3. That's one of the things that makes it sound the way it does. In fact, if we look at the notes in that bar, we actually have this. And we would obviously expect a B flat, not a B. Here, we expect that, so it'd be more like this. Which sounds a bit weird. So obviously it can't be an E minor 7 flat 5 because that B is the natural fifth of an E minor 7 chord. So it's just an E minor 7. So if you've been playing E minor 7 flat 5 there, lose 15 jazz points, report yourself to the jazz police immediately. You are a bad person. So Jamie made a mistake. The point of this lesson is not to be horrible to Jamie Aebersold. This shows more, I think, that you've got to take commercial transcriptions with a pinch of salt because they are done by human beings. And 2, Parker, when it comes to soloing on the tune, actually often played E minor 7 flat 5. It's like he was chopping and changing. He didn't really seem to think of that as being like etched into stone. The important thing is that he was going to a D minor target chord. So having things written out in black and white in charts can give them a certainty and sort of concreteness, which isn't always the case in the actual music. This music was actually played mostly by ear, remember, and it's still best learned that way. So I think an experienced changes player will just see it as being, we can go into D minor, spiral into that chord however we want, and it's something maybe encouraged by the simpler, like fifthless shell voicings, these kind of things. So typically for like Blues for Us. None of those chords have fifths in, really. So, it's like that kind of gives you a little bit more leeway. But, to be honest, when Parker's playing with a rhythm section and Parker plays a different note, nobody's going to care what the rhythm section's playing. He's just going to bulldoze his way through it like some unimaginably elegant rhinoceros. Really seems to like this thing of using, in this case, it was the B over the A7. So either the 5th of the 2 chord or the 9th of the dominant, depending on which chord it's over. So a good example would be something like Billy's Bounce, where we've got this going on. So he goes, and the chordal context there is like we're going A minor, 7, D7, G minor. So we get this. And you can see like, boom, boom, yeah. That's basically what's going on with the line. It's just that sliding down. No, we don't get the last F there, but it's kind of this implied voice leading going down, which is very satisfying actually. You notice that the E flat also forms the upper note of this enclosure around the 5th of the G minor. So I can start to play around with ideas like that. So for instance, theoretically, I don't think there's anything that odd. I think most people realise, obviously, that there's different minor scales, and one of the minor scales we commonly use is the melodic minor, and that just has this E note in it. But it gets a little bit weirder. Let's take a look at this little figure from the head of Donna Lee. So we play this bit. Second half. And then let's take that apart. So right, where does this happen? Well, again, if we look at the Abominable book, we'll see that over the this is over the G minor 7 flat 5 chord. So we have like a 2-5-1 going to F minor in Donna Lee. The prevailing key is A flat, so it's like just the relative minor. And we can see that we've got this funny little thing here where instead of the expected E flat and the expected A flat, especially with the D minor, that's a third of the key. That's the note that you expect to hear. We actually have an A natural and E flat, so that kind of goes back to the minor key. That's very much F harmonic minor there. I don't think it was written by accident, given the prevailing key is A flat, and A flat normally has A flat and E flat in it. It seems like Miles Davis, for I think it's him who wrote it, because it doesn't sound anything like Charlie Parker, this tune. It sounds much more like other Miles Davis compositions of the era, like Little Willie Leaps, and I will die on that hill. In fact, I think it's easiest if, again, we just assume that Jamie Aebersold just got the chord wrong. It should be G minor 7 here. Otherwise, we're kind of rummaging around in the, in the back pages of this book. I don't know if you know, like, scale syllabus on the back cover of the Omnibook, or the Omnishambles book, or whatever we're calling it. But there's lots of surreal scales that I don't think Charlie Parker ever learned. I think it's better just to assume that it's like a standard G minor 7 scale, which is either a G Dorian or a C mixed Lydian or C dominant scale if you're a Barry Harris student. I just think it's easier to assume that. So we're kind of basically treating this G minor as if it's coming from the F major key, if you like. I mean, why would you do that? So Miles Davis wrote many things in his autobiography aside from claiming the ownership of Donna Lee, which I do believe. And another thing that I believe, although I wouldn't believe that much in his autobiography, is that he was also heavily influenced by Charlie Christian. So that's really interesting, because it really sounds like he's kind of hearing that as what we might call today Mixolydian, or perhaps, again, if you're a Barry Harris student, a dominant scale, just a regular dominant scale, and then resolving to D minor. So that's very much like the Miles example, in fact, where we have the same scale used. So we're thinking about the 2, and maybe the 5 as well, as being actually major. And of course, with 2 5s, 5 1s, they're kind of the same thing. So I think that's possibly where he gets it from. Now, Wes Montgomery was obviously hugely influenced by Charlie Christian, and I just want to show you an extreme example from his recording of Caravan. The first chord of Caravan is C7, right? And it kind of sustains for a while. It hangs around for a while before moving to F minor. And the nature of the song, we've really got that kind of effect of it being the effect of it being like F harmonic minor. Wes mostly hangs out on his favourite sort of G minor 7, G Dorian, even G melodic minor lick. So it's kind of playing, if you like, as a C13 or even a C13 sharp 11. For instance, this line is kind of a G minor major 7th arpeggio, so that gives you that kind of sound. It's the use of a melodic minor mode, if you like, but he's not doing the expected one. He's doing like he's creating that Lydian dominant sound, which you wouldn't normally expect in a minor key. And then that's kind of more of a G Dorian vibe, and he goes a bit like Charlie Christian outlining the triad, the G triad in this case, really, really clearly. And then he does this sort of cute little whole tone lick that he does. And then there's this line sort of descending, kind of belongs. can call it, you know, an altered line, C altered, or maybe, you know, F sharp 7, sharp 11th, or whatever. And that's a more kind of obvious way to lead ourselves into the F chord at the end. So in a way, what Wes is doing here is he's kind of going. I mean, I'm using diminished there, but like moving to the F minor at the last minute, which is not something I would ever think of doing, but it sounds fantastic. If you listen to the record, the pianist was clearly in on it, because whoever they are, I can't remember, they comp in the same mode as Wes is playing. They comp in that sort of G Dorian mode while the bass hangs out over a C7. It's a really cool sound, and yeah, again, I just wouldn't think of doing that over Caravan, because Caravan I would think of as being an altered dominant. I think of that as being a different beast, and it kind of shows how inflexible we've become in our thinking that we wouldn't countenance that. I'm just going to give you an example now from Cannonball Adderley. This isn't quite the same thing, but it's similar in, and it shows, I think, how jazzers of the era would think. It's a similar kind of logic. So the song Milestones is basically for the it's an AABA tune, and often if you look at charts, it says for the A section it's just G minor Dorian for 8 bars. A sort of early example of Miles's modal writing, like So What, for instance. In fact, there's a riff that ends up on A minor 7, so that's not quite right. So it's kind of this sort of thing. And then it goes to this one. That sort of A minor 7 sound. Now, of course, both of those chords belong to G Dorian, so I'd be, you know, if I was playing it, I'd probably be hanging out over G Dorian, you know, again. So, you know, I'm just hanging out over G Dorian, maybe marking that A Dorian chord. In fact, that's not how Cannonball plays it at all. He treats the A minor 7 as being, as in the West Montgomery, but kind of reversed, a separate key area. So he's almost playing it, and because he's using so much kind of C7 bebop vocabulary over the G minor, he also uses like D7 bebop vocabulary over the A minor. So if I play like the line, you know, this is this sequency thing. And then he goes, bebop scale, right? And there's a little side slip. Kind of moves to A flat minor, I guess, A flat Dorian. And then he plays this. And we end up on B, which is the major third again of the minor. And this kind of gives us the 9th of the A minor. I think it sounds amazing. I think it's one of my favourite lines in jazz, that opening line that he plays. It's fantastic. So, you know, again, like if I and into the B section, right? So, you know, just moving between the G stroke C7 and the A minor D7. And by the way I'm constructing these lines is very linked to the concept I was talking about in the Barry Harris for Bebop video. So I'll put a link to that and you can check that out if you're not quite sure what I'm doing there. So for me, this is very similar, even though it's kind of a modal vamp, it's very similar to the way that Miles, Wes and Charlie used the major 2-5 on the minor 2-5-1. So this is a very long-winded way of saying jazz is like 2 minor 9 or 5-13 in a minor key. Another good example is the bridge of Invitation, where we've got, you know, this sort of figure. So this is, in this case, B minor ninth. This ends up being because it's 2-5-1. This ends up being an E7 with a flat 9 and a flat 13. I like A minor major 7th there, and then A minor ninth. So that sounds really good. And you can see how much does that really, doesn't it? The melody. You can see how much option there is for, or how many options there are for, how much option, how many chord, how much option. You can see how many options there are for doing voice leading. Whereas, like standard, minor or minor and altered, kind of just doesn't quite have the same travel to it. So hopefully I've kind of convinced you that, you can play 2-5-1s like this. I think it sounds hip. So moving on, there is something which is like this in kind of, like the Mark Levine jazz theory book type theory that a lot of people are familiar with, which is the Locrian sharp 2 on minor 7 flat 5, for instance, this sort of thing. It's kind of stuff you get in the Mark Levine book. Here we're using a Locrian sharp 2 scale, which is this kind of thing. Alter scale over the A7. So that sounds, that's the sort of thing you would learn in a jazz course or a jazz school or something. But I think, like, if you look, you've got, again, that F sharp. We're in the key of D minor here. So you've got that F sharp, that major third, which kind of takes us slightly out of the key. Now, Mark Levine talks about this in the theory book. He points out that almost all of the early bebop musicians played the Locrian mode on half diminished chords. Mark Levine was a student of Barry Harris, so he's kind of talking about what Barry Harris tells you to practice from a slightly different angle. We would call it like the dominant chord. So, for instance, a C7 chord on E minor 7 flat 5, or a C7 scale on. He suggests that, like, kind of this melodic minor stuff is a bit newer, and I think he's probably right there. Not that I've listened to all of the jazz ever. I think it starts a bit with Billy Strayhorn, but I think it was well underway by the time of, Bill Evans. And if you listen to Bill Evans playing Beautiful Love, he plays this sort of thing. His chords, and they're really nice. E minor 9 flat 5, no third, and then A7 flat 13, and then D minor 9 major 7th. So that's very textbooky, and there's a nice little line. So there's a nice little line which Bill Evans plays. It's like in the second half of the tune. I'll just break that down for you. So it's kind of like based around a lower neighbour tone below like a B flat augmented triad, and then he plays. I mean, this could be a D natural minor scale, or over the A7 it gives us some altered tones like sharp 9 and flat 9 and stuff, and the flat 13. So it's actually, and it resolves very nicely into the third of D minor there. So that's a, again, we've got that F sharp, right? So you can play around with that sort of stuff. Anyway, I think like all that stuff's pretty well covered. There's a sort of endless stream of bright-eyed Berklee students who can explain that to you on YouTube. I'd rather focus on the more unusual options. One thing that I think sounds amazing in a minor key is the 13 flat 9 chord. And there's actually a really great example in Invitation. It's really, for a an obvious jam session tune, it's got some fantastic harmony in it. So this thing, we're in C minor, very obviously. And then we move to a B flat 7 chord, and it's a 13th, like that, right? And then we move to an E flat minor chord, so it's like a modulation, upper minor third, and that's, you know, it's major, it's unexpected minor. I mean, there's a similar sort of situation in How High the Moon, where you're expecting it to go to major. So it goes da 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 ba ba da da ba ba da da, and then or unexpected major. So there's a few tunes that play around with this idea, but if you listen to the original soundtrack version, there's definitely a flat 9 in there as well, which gives us the B13 flat 9 sound going into the minor. That's kind of a sound which, for instance, like Peter Bernstein really liked. So this is a sort of mixture. We go start on the E, but we quickly move to an F sharp minor triad, but then there's also a major third in it as well. So I think that's a really nice way to play the A7, to hang out on that F sharp major and F sharp minor chord on an A7. So D minor major 7th sound. It sounds really good. You know, gnarly 13 flat 9 chord belongs to, you know, the half whole scale. I don't really like that scale very much as a musical device in itself, and this seems to be like, you can see there the triad is in that voicing. This is like more like a regular sort of 13th chord when I play the minor. You get cool sounds if you just take that F sharp triad and add. I like to add a flat 9 to it there, and you know, you can also add a flat 3 to it. You know, that sounds really great to me, and I can make a lot more use out of that. You know, if I was to. I can find a more musical use for that than doing this, you know. I just find that very, very grey sounding. I suppose it sounds slightly better in thirds or whatever, but I find like the triads, you know, from the half whole scale are much more interesting, and there's a lot of them as well. Last thing about that particular option is you've got the so-called Herbie Hancock substitution. So you've got the A7, instead of trying to substituting it with the, you know, E flat dominant as you normally would, you can instead use an E flat minor 7th. So sounds really nice. For instance, you know, that's just like E minor 7, E flat minor 7th, D minor 7 you could play, but I'm playing D minor major 7th there, and you get this very clear, like, triad effect moving down. It's just very, very simple but very effective. You know, you can break that up by using country motion ideas, for instance, you know, this kind of stuff. You know, there I'm just playing the first chord as a minor 7th instead. And then or so we've got a chromatic ascent while the other voice goes down. Stuff like that sounds really good. But the logic is basically the same. We're basing it on the same idea. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the video. I hope it suggested some harmonic options you may not have considered, or you may even have shied away from, and encouraged you to explore sounds in both your own and your favourite player's harmony. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, which I hope you did if you got this far and aren't just imagining ways to extract vengeance. And as always, comments below telling me I'm a fool or whatever, as per normal. Thanks for watching.